Creator and host of the Empire Files, Abby Martin, had this to say about Secretary Antony Blinken about the deaths of Shireen Abu Akleh and Jamal Khashoggi, two journalists and U.S. citizens who were murdered. Let's watch.
Secretary Blinken, what about Shireen Abu Akleh? She was murdered by Israeli forces, right? CNN just agreed to this. These are your two greatest allies in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia and Israel. They have murdered American journalists and there have been absolutely no repercussions. And you're sitting up here talking about the freedom of press and democracy. The United States is denying sovereignty to tens of millions of people around the world with draconian sanctions for electing leaders that you do not like. Why is there no accountability for Israel or Saudi Arabia for murdering journalists? It is one of the most dangerous places in the world to be a journalist in Palestine.
I deplore the loss of Shireen. She was a remarkable journalist, an American citizen, as you all know. And there too, we are determined to follow the facts and get to the truth of what happened.
Secretary Blinken, with all due respect.
I'm sorry, with respect, they have not yet been established.
Yes, it has.
No, they have not. We are looking for an independent, credible investigation. When that investigation happens, we will follow the facts wherever they lead. It's as straightforward as that. That has not yet happened, but it's something that we very much want to see happen.
And we'll have time after the panel, of course, to talk more about this.
That wasn't the only heat thrown at Blinken. Let's watch this.
How you justify the invitation of Dr. Ariel Henry from Haiti when he is actually governing with no constitutional mandate. His government has been implicated in many different crimes, including potentially the murder of the past president. Countries like Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua are being excluded from the Summit of the Americas because you deem them to not be democratic. But how can you use that as your justification when you have the so-called Prime Minister of Haiti who is ruling under no sort of democratic mandate here?
Yeah, we, like many other countries, are determined to get to the facts of what happened in Haiti, including the assassination of the previous prime minister. We're determined to find the facts wherever they lead and to whomever they lead.
Well, sir, but does democracy only matter if they disagree with the United States government? What is your actual basis for saying a government is undemocratic and another one it can't be invited and another one that's undemocratic can be invited?
That question was in response to President Biden's decision not to invite the governments of Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela to the Summit of the Americas that began last week.
Host of the Katie Halper Show Podcast, Katie Halper joins us now to weigh in. Katie, thank you for joining us. These clips really blew up on the internet yesterday, especially among left Twitter. I wonder what you make of Blinken's response to Abby Martin when he said, we're waiting for the facts about what really happened, particularly in the case of Shireen Abu Akleh.
Yeah, well, I think that the facts have been established. As Abby Martin pointed out, there was an investigation, a thorough investigation by CNN. They went over forensic evidence. They went over eyewitness accounts. No one who takes truth seriously actually thinks that there's any doubt. And as we've gone over on this show before, Israel lied at first, and they blamed the shooting of and murder of Shireen Abu Akleh on Palestinians who would have, the Palestinians they claim did it from an alley that wouldn't have even been able to reach where she was. So there is an attempt at a cover up. What Abby actually accomplished is that she did get Blinken to agree to call on an independent investigation as opposed to just letting Israel do the investigating. And that is significant. Of course, I'm not going to be holding my breath to see if he actually enforces that or demands that, or if that happens. But, Bet Selem, for instance, the Israeli human rights organization, the biggest organization in Israel that focuses on the occupation, won't even cooperate with Israel's investigations because they're such a joke and there's no accountability. So shout out to Abby for getting him to say that, although, again, it's probably not worth that much.
Well, I mean, what would have been the right thing if he was going to make kind of all the lefties listening happy? Good luck with that. What should he have said?
Well, it's not like we're asking for something insane. I mean, just condemning Israel for murdering journalists would be a nice start. Yeah, an American journalist. Condemning Saudi Arabia for murdering Khashoggi would have been a nice start. Of course, if Blinken did that, he wouldn't be Blinken because his job is just to cover for the hypocrisy of the United States. that's what you do when you're the Secretary of State. But that I don't think that in this case it's an impossible thing to demand. I mean, they're pretty rational, straightforward things that the left was looking for, that the left would be looking for. Just your run-of-the-mill accountability, the United States not running around undermining democracy abroad while pretending to care about democracy. And there's a lot of, obviously, hypocrisy that happens when it comes to dictatorship and democracy in Latin America. What makes this especially laughable and rich is the fact that Joe Biden, while condemning certain countries as dictatorial, there's a report in the AP that Jair Bolsonaro, the president of Brazil, who's the most authoritarian, autocratic, Trumpian president in all of Latin America, he was invited. Brazil was invited. Not only that, but according to the AP, Bolsonaro demanded certain concessions and conditions before agreeing to go, like not being asked about his deforestation of the Amazon or his human rights violations. So again, doesn't sound like Biden is that concerned with human rights when he's inviting Bolsonaro, not only inviting him, but apparently granting him certain concessions. Another thing that makes this laughable, because it's better to laugh than cry, I guess, is the fact that Biden has said that he's going to be visiting Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, in July. I guess the joke is, you don't get invited to summits if you are considered dictatorial by the United States, but you do get visited and whitewashed and rehabilitated. And Biden had said that he was going to treat Saudi Arabia as a pariah state. Obviously, that's not how you treat a country as a pariah state, by visiting its leader. And, again, if you want to look at any... Oh, and then we didn't even talk about Julian Assange when we're talking about freedom of press, who's been notoriously persecuted and prosecuted by not just the Trump administration, but the Biden administration. And again, Biden taking a page out of Trump's book as opposed to Obama's book. Obama decided to stop persecuting Assange, and Trump took that up, very aggressively pursued Assange, and then Biden, instead of agreeing with his former running mate and his president, sided with Trump, which is really extremely shameful and should have all people who are mad at Trump about his attack on the free press and the fourth estate up in arms, but somehow they're not. And the United States, of course, has subverted democracy in Latin America. It's like a specialty. They've got it down to an art, starting in 1954 with the coup in Guatemala, overthrowing Jacobo Arbenz' government, to 1973, Chile overthrowing Salvador Allende and installing a brutal dictator, Augusto Pinochet, who tortured, murdered, disappeared thousands of people, to Central America in the 80s, and then more recently, we don't have all day, but more recently in the 90s with the Haiti, Honduras in 2009, Bolivia in 2019. We now know from a Mark Esper book that the United States was planning an armed coup against Venezuela as recently as 2020. So it's just and then they tried to kill Fidel Castro literally hundreds of times. So it's just laughable. It's ridiculous to hear the United States kind of wax poetic about democracy when it comes to Latin America.
Yeah, the real question here isn't, what would make left Twitter happy. It's why there isn't more widespread outrage, and why it takes these two intrepid reporters asking these kinds of questions to even spark a dialogue about the obvious hypocrisy of the United States of America. We've talked on the show a lot about anti-interventionism, and there's a lot of simpatico between us about our frustration with American warmongering and interventionism, and this is and also free speech issues, and this is a melding of all of those concerns here in this pair of questions. It's worth noting also that Abby Martin's show was censored earlier this year. People were very outraged on the left about the fact that she has been criticized throughout her career for reporting for Russia RT, even though she has been outspoken on RT, and they gave her the latitude to do so about various issues, including 2014 Ukraine. Exactly, over Ukraine in 2014, et cetera, et cetera.
You can't even argue that some of this stuff makes any sense, even in a realpolitik kind of way of thinking. What was ignoring the brutal murder of Khashoggi, what has that gotten us? Saudi Arabia is not playing ball in our moment of crisis whatsoever. That was supposed to be the entire rationale. It's not a moral rationale, but just a strict utilitarian calculus.
Level, you're saying it doesn't work. Yeah. Right. And of course, supporting the war in Yemen, which Biden has just continued and rebranded. He hasn't ended that. And but I think, Bree, you speak to something really important, which is that it's kind of outrageous that the corporate media is so beholden to the powers that be that you have to have two exceptional people interrupting the Summit of the Americas, asking questions that really should be asked by every member of the press at every moment that this comes up, whether it's why they didn't invite these certain countries, how they are turning a blind eye basically to the murder of Shireen, how they've helped intervene behind the scenes and either publicly, but most often behind the scenes in subverting democracy in these countries. And the fact that you have these two great reporters, Eugene Purrier at Breakthrough News and Abby Martin at the Empire Files, and it's so you have to do it in a way that interrupts. It's kind of a protest. These questions that should be asked by, if we had any real adversarial press, they'd be asking these questions as well. And it wouldn't be so newsworthy, the fact that they were just being asked these questions.
Yeah.
Well, Katie, thank you so much for talking with us about these things.
Thanks.
And we'll be back with more Rising right after this.